This week we're going to talk about identity and specifically Microsoft Entra, which is becoming a suite of tools and utilities to enhance identity and authentication in Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Azure. But just how it works, well, let's stay tuned. You might learn something. Greetings everyone, Andy Malone, Microsoft MVP, as well as a Microsoft certified trainer. In this episode, we're going to take a look at identity, and specifically, we're going to talk about Microsoft Entra. Entra is fast becoming a whole suite of tools and utilities all centered around identity, authentication, and authorization. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the new features. Now, unfortunately, I'm not going to have time to cover them all, but I am planning on covering each of the topics in depth in a future episode. So how do you get started? What are the features and how do they work? Well, we're going to cover them this week. Now, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, we love subscribers. So bump that subscribe button up there, ring that bell, and you won't miss out on the good stuff in the future. And as you know, I love your comments, questions, and any feedback that you have, not just on this, but also on my other videos as well. So I think without any further ado, I think it's about time we jumped in and had a look at some of these demos. Let's take a look. So to take a look at the new Entra portal, I'm simply going to go into Azure AD, and you can see here it's on the front page. Now, what we have here is a completely redesigned Azure Active Directory. And as you can also see, it's also been incorporated and extended with something called permissions management. And this was Microsoft's acquisition of CloudKnox last year. We also have Verified ID, so known as verified claims. And we also have something called Workload Identities, as well as identity governance. And some of this I actually covered in a recent video. So the first thing that I want to do is really just take you through the changes in Azure Active Directory and some of the settings in the Admin Center. So here I'm going to go into an overview of my Azure AD, and I'm just going to zoom in just a little bit on that. You can see a little bit more. Okay. So you can see that nothing's really changed here. A couple of things that you might want to know here is that we have a secure score for identity here. So secure score, of course, is it just lets you know how secure your identity is. And probably one of the reasons why mine is so low is because I still need to roll out multi-factor authentication, of course. So I can go in, I can manage all of my users here. And you can see it's pretty much the same that we had before. I can go into deleted users. One thing that we do have here is you also have, rather than delving into Azure AD and going into properties and things, we have the user settings here, which is really useful. And specifically in here, you can control things like password reset, and these are the tenant settings. So for example, do you want to integrate for example, LinkedIn? Do you want to have your users be able to log in with LinkedIn and things like that? Do you want to allow your users to remain signed in, or do you want to force a login, a log out and a log back in again? And that is particularly useful for things like if you work in a bank. So you might not want to allow your users to stay signed in. And again, you can combine that with the likes of conditional access. Now, the other things that we also have here is we've got audit logs, and we've also got sign-in logs here as well. Now, in addition, we've also got group access. And of course, groups here, you can create your not just dynamic groups, but you can also create standard groups as well. I can look at my admin properties, so my tenant settings for my groups. You can also set expiry dates on groups here. So for example, if a group has been extended to become a Microsoft team, this can also include an expiry policy. So for example, in this case, if somebody doesn't use this particular team or group for 30 days, then it will automatically delete itself. That's quite useful. We also have a naming policy. So if you want to set up a group naming policy, maybe have a prefix or a suffix, for example, you can do that. We can also set up privileged access groups as well. I actually covered this in a recent video. So this is where if you are a member of a particular group, you will automatically have a role assigned to you. All right. Now, it's really nice to see here that we also have devices, and you'll notice that not every menu is displayed. Now, at the moment, we're in transition, which means that the menus are being changed, they're being rewritten, and so on. So you might notice over the next few weeks some changes that are coming in. But things like devices, this is where you can come in. You would see all of your devices, and you've got your device settings, enterprise roaming, and so on. So this is the new legacy portal. You can go back to the old legacy settings, but this is the new kind of view that we have here. Now, of course, you can also view your BitLocker keys here as well. So you can configure your BitLocker keys on your Windows devices, and you can back them up in your Azure Key Vault. So if a user leaves the company, you can still recover that user's data. Other things that we've got, you can also deploy applications here. So these can include not just enterprise applications, but also things like app proxies. So an application proxy as well. So an application proxy is where, for example, you've got your applications running on an on-premises server. Other things that you can do here, you can also configure things like conditional access policies. You can get usage and insights on applications, which I absolutely love, by the way. So you can see all your applications here, and it shows me how many times they were accessed, were there any failed sign-ins, what's the success rate if users were having particular problems and things like that. And you can combine that. You can look over the last 7 days or the last 30 days. And if you're using a hybrid scenario, you can also see any kind of authentication issues there as well. So that's really nice. In addition, we also have things like protect and secure. So this is a new menu that it now includes all of your security settings in one easy place. So we have conditional access, identity protection, we have authentication methods, which is awesome. By the way, definitely take a look at this. And this includes things like if you want to configure, for example, a temporary access pass or something like that. You also have password reset here. And this is where you can also add in the new custom attributes. So if you've got, for example, user objects and you want to add in additional attributes, then you can add in not just attributes, but you can also add in attribute sets here as well. And I'm going to cover this actually in a future session. Also, if you're using identity protection, this you can see things like risky activities. So, for example, if you're monitoring risky users or risky groups, you can see here that you might, for example, have a confirmed a compromised user. So you've determined that the user is, for example, he's just logged on from London, and 15 minutes later he's logged on from Singapore, and that's impossible travel. So of course that tells me that Pradeep's account has obviously been compromised in some way. So this takes me into identity protection, as well as things like conditional access and those important logs. Okay, so very, very useful. Now, what else have we got? Identity governance. I absolutely love this. So identity governance includes tools like entitlement management, which I did recently, and this is your access packages. You've also got access reviews, and you can assign these from here, but you can also assign them from within applications and also group membership. So an access review might be, for example, I've given you access to a specific application, and I could do a review every 3 months or every 6 months to determine, do you still need access to that piece of software, or do you still need to be a member of that group? And in here, we've also got privileged identity management. So just enough administration, or JIA, delivered just in time. And again, I covered this in recent videos, so definitely take a look at that. So an exciting enhancement to identity governance is something called Lifecycle Workflows. Now, as I've mentioned before in a number of my videos, a natural progression for Azure Active Directory is to be integrated into HR systems. So if you're using a HR system, you can automate, for example, onboarding and offboarding employees. And this is kind of the first step in that. As you can see, it's currently in public preview, and I'm going to come up here to workflows. Now, there are a number of templates that you can create. So one of the first things we do is we create or a workflow from a template. And there's a whole bunch of workflows to choose from. So onboarding or pre-hired employee, onboarding a new hire, real-time employee termination, so including the tasks that you would carry out when somebody leaves the company, pre-offboarding, so if an employee gave their notice, onboarding or offboarding an employee, and of course post-offboarding, so a little bit further down the line. So I want to bring in a new employee, but this is the pre-hire. So you're not quite there yet. They've not joined the company. So let's have a look at this template. So again, you just carry on through a series of steps. So you can see in this case from 7 days, so 7 days before the employee joins the company, I want to essentially onboard this employee in 7 days' time. So I'm going to say, okay, configure the scope, and you can see here that it's using a dynamic expression. And in this case, the property, as an example, is the department equals marketing. So you could change that. You can also add another expression. So, for example, if the department equals marketing and they're in Oslo, then obviously onboard them. So that I'm just going to use this as an example. Then I click next, and you can see, okay, what do I want to do? So what this will do is it will onboard the employee in 7 days. It's going to send an email, and it's also going to generate what we call a temporary access pass. Now I can click into here, and you can see it gives me details about the temporary access pass. So in this case, it's saying, okay, the user's going to have usage for 8 hours of this pass. And again, it's a one-time use. So when the user receives the one-time access pass, they can basically log in with this, and essentially they'll be prompted to set up things like multi-factor authentication. So from a security perspective, this is an absolutely fantastic feature. Okay, now that we've done that, I'm simply going to go and review, and am I ready to schedule the workflow? So I am indeed ready to schedule the workflow. So I'm just going to click on create, and off it goes and creates that workflow for me. So now that would work alongside, for example, a HR system. So 7 days prior to employment, it's going to generate an email along with that temporary access pass. Now, other things that you can also do, you can go in and review any deleted workflows that you've created. And also you can do things like custom extensions. So if you want to add in custom fields and things like that, you do need an Azure subscription for that. So I can't demo that just now. Ultimately, of course, everything generates an audit log, so you can go in and have a look at auditing there. And again, we also have a troubleshooting wizard there. So on the front page here, you can see that we get the workflow schedule. This refreshes every 3 hours, but again, you can control that. You can customize that as well. So there you have it. So when we talk about onboarding employees, offboarding employees, this is an absolutely awesome feature. And in fact, in the not too distant future, I'm going to do a full session on this because it's super exciting. So those are just some of those changes that are rolled up in the new Azure AD Admin Center. And the idea is it's getting it really simplified for use. Now, as I mentioned, last year, Microsoft purchased a product called CloudKnox. Now, this is not going to work for me because I don't have a license, as you can see. So I'm going to set that up in the future so that we're going to walk through that. So if you've got, for example, Active Directory on premises, then what this does is it goes in and it collates all the information and all the permissions details on all of your objects in your organization. So all your file and folder permissions, and it's a great way to go in and view all of those. Now, in addition, we've also got this cool feature called Verified Claims of Verified ID. And the idea of this is you can create your own, let's say, digital card, your own digital ID. So for example, you create your own personal digital ID, you upload all of your personal information, for example, passport, banking, and so on. And that's all then verified. And the idea is in the future, if you ever need to prove your identity, you will have a digital ID, very much like what you've got on your credit card, for example, your mobile pay. So if you use Apple Pay or something like that, it's very, very similar to that. The difference is it's an ID. It's a verifiable ID. Let me show you what I mean. Here is a quick user demo of how this works. So I'm Matthew Michael. I'm an employee at the Woodgrove Bank, and I've been asked to verify my digital ID. So I'm simply going in with True Identity, and one of the first things it's going to do is it says we need to prove who you are. So it's going to take a selfie, and of course it takes a picture of me, and it then verifies that selfie against all my records. Once I've proven my ID and all of that information has been verified, it then issues me with what we call a DID, a digital ID. So that verification process is now complete, and the last thing I need to do is just verify that with multi-factor authentication, of course, for an additional layer of security. So I open up my Authenticator app. Once I've done that, I can now add my digital ID to my Apple Wallet or my phone wallet. And you can see, very similar to a credit card history, except it's all my identity. So if I need to prove my identity, I simply have the card and I can verify beyond reasonable doubt who I really am. Now, although Verified ID is in its early stages, you can go in here and of course you can go ahead and configure your organization for Verified ID. Now, you do need to have an Azure subscription for this, but you do have a single place in which to manage all your credentials and add your organization in. All right. Now, at the moment, there are limited applications for this. Microsoft do provide some software development tools tools. And of course, if you want to develop your own apps to work with Verified ID, then it's out there. It's also interesting to note that Apple are also developing something similar. So digital IDs or blockchain identity is really an exciting development in the identity business. So watch out for that. I think it's going to be very cool. So now what we have is we have something called Workload Identities, which now comes part of Microsoft Entra. And Entra is the one place, the number one place to see all of your workload identities. Now, not necessarily users, but things like enterprise applications and service principals, so service accounts, Microsoft apps, and any managed identities as well. And these can include things like not necessarily users and devices, but other types of identities, such as software. So I can scroll down here and you can see that everything is now in one place. So for example, if I need to do a conditional access rule for a piece of software, if I need to configure identity protection for one of my users, if I need to perform an access review, so who's been using LinkedIn the most. I can also set up audit logging on these service and account principals. And you can also enable recommendations for things like best practices as well. So just to show you that this is now workload identities, and this is such a cool place. And you can see that if I go into my applications, there in fact is my not only my object ID, but also my application ID as well. So if I'm performing things like conditional access policies, if I'm performing any identity policy rules, then this is definitely the one place that I want to go. So there we have it, just a quick overview of some of the cool features in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. And as you can see, if you want to try it out, you can actually get an account for free. You can try many of these features for free. And you can not just Microsoft Entra, but many of the other cloud products that we have to offer as well. So there you have it, just a quick overview of the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. So there you have it, Microsoft Entra. Isn't that cool? And there's some really cool features coming in there, and it's great to see that in preview. So if you've not checked that out, definitely take a look. It's definitely well worth it. Hey, listen, if you've enjoyed this week's episode, bump that like button, ring the bell, and make sure that you subscribe, because we love to have you on board with us. And if you've got questions, comments about this or any of my other sessions, please just get them down below. All right, thank you so much for joining me this time around, and I'll see you soon. I'm Andy Malone. Stay safe. Hey, thanks so much for dropping by today. Here's a couple of videos that you may enjoy, and while you're here, go ahead, click on the subscribe button and you won't miss out.